Okay, so this is where we are. The museum, the art, the history to Judaism. And I guess this was a 17th century chateau that is now housing the museum. And so we just went through security and now we're going to walk inside where it says entrance. Entry with tickets. There's tickets to be bought. You see this? The Ark. Aron Kodesh. It's an ark. Okay.
From 1472 for
Amazing. There's a ketubah. The flag
1920.
before the state of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what the flag was going to even look like. all Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Purim. McGregor. Spin around. And this is the whole Megillah. The Gansha Megillah. And Shabbat. Another Megillah. What year is this from?
1730 to
1730 to 1740. It's a few years old. Inside this room looks like Hanukkah. And this is Hanukkahs from Italy. Germany. The Netherlands. This is Eastern Europe. We'll say Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine. And then North Africa. The Swardian. And this is Passover, the Pesach plates. And here we have a sukkah. Very, very cool. Look at the inside of this. Wow. That is very cool. And there's a diasporobe case. This is Jewish life in Amsterdam. Models of the old temples, now gone. Mikveh.
answer your question, so take advantage of that, because normally in the high season all our tours are sold out, and this week we have a few of those quiet ones. Also, you don't have to remember the names of the shop or the street that we've been on, or even the name of the food actually, because after the tour I will be sending you an email with a full list of all the places we visited and everything we eat today. So later on, the names of the different cheeses, of the different wines, you don't have to memorize or make notes.
Oh,
It's
that's
really
great.
for you to relax. You don't have to, because some of them. Of
And there's no
course, the French-
test at the end?
There might be a written exam for 10 points. You'll get a passport if you get that. French passport. But that way, it's really for you to relax and try as many different things as you like. And then if you have a favorite, you can really easily find it back again as well. One more very important thing from my end before we get started, if there is anything I need to know about, like things that you can't or won't eat and drink, I know it asks this also when you make your reservation. So anything you put on your reservation I'm already aware of, but if you left anything out, please let me know at your earliest convenience, because I want to know, of course, if it's something to avoid, that is very important, or to find your replacement, so let me know whenever that is necessary. I'm not planning on giving you anything strange or weird to eat. It's like the best places in this neighborhood here. But yeah, let me know how you're doing with that. Now, what we can do to do a little introduction, if we head up to the end of this street here, there's a little square. There might be some shade there for us
we
as
were
well.
waiting up there actually.
Yes. It has been a scorcher so far today. I'm from Northern Europe. I'm from Holland originally, so I am having a hard time with this as well. So if we head up there, we can do a little introduction about the neighborhood, and that's also where we'll do our first tasting.
Okay.
So let's head up there, find our good spots. The area and our first stop as well. So when you've arrived in Paris, you're getting your bearings kind of. So if you look at Paris on a map, you'll see that it's divided into lots of different neighborhoods. Right, so our neighborhood in Paris is called an arrondissement. There's 20 in total, and on a map, Paris sort of wraps around itself like a big giant snail, really. So 20 neighborhoods in total. You can always tell which one you are currently in if you look at the top of the street sign. So there's a whole bunch of them over here on this corner. So on that top bit, that round bit, it will give you a number between 1 and 20 to let you know where you are. So right now we are in the 3rd arrondissement. We are on the right bank of the river Seine. So it's left and right of Ile de la Cité, which is the island where Notre Dame is. So that is your like point zero, and then everything is left and right of that. So the right bank of the Seine, and then the 3rd and a little bit of the 4th, it overlaps a little bit, is known as the Marais, which means the marsh or the swamp. So it gives us an idea what this whole neighborhood used to look like a long time ago. So this used to be really wet, swampy land. They couldn't really build anything here until well into the Middle Ages, when they found a way to drain out most of that swamp. And then this became, particularly in the 16th and 17th century, a really chic, like residential neighborhood. And so a lot of people who were working already in the business district of Paris, which is also on this side of the river, if they had successful businesses, they could build a really beautiful mansion for themselves in the Marais, or people who had high positions at court, of course, so that you're talking about the time of like Louis XIV, that could also make you a lot of money. So this is where those people would be staying. And that kind of stayed that way all the way up until the 18th century. During the French Revolution, it was of course very much a bad moment to be an aristocrat or a very wealthy member of the clergy. You were in Versailles today, so you've seen what that looked like until 1789. And during this time, a lot of these mansions, they were confiscated by the revolutionary government, and then some of them unfortunately were destroyed, but others were also repurposed. So they're now all public buildings. So libraries, archives, museums, most of them are in this neighborhood still, and they're open to the public. Some of them are free to visit even, and they might have like a courtyard or garden on the inside as well that you can't really tell from street level what is going on. So this neighborhood doesn't really have a huge green space, but it's like all these like little pockets that are happening behind these big doors. But there is really a lot to explore here. Now, the way Paris looks now, that layout of the different arrondissements and that really typical Parisian look. You know, everything is very uniform looking, like the buildings are all the same height, the same style, those really big boulevards that we have everywhere. This was the result of a gigantic makeover that Paris got during the 19th century. So during the from the 1850s to the 1870s, Paris got a big makeover. This was mostly the work of a man called George Haussmann, who was commissioned by the emperor at the time, Napoleon III, to modernize Paris. So up until that time, Paris still had a very medieval layout. So instead of having these big boulevards, we had these like windy little streets, these little passageways that people lived in. There was no pavement, no street lights, no sewer system in Paris, but it did already have 1 million people living in it. So we can imagine what that would look and smell like. So Haussmann was told to get rid of all of that and to rebuild the city pretty much completely. So he did that to 70% of Paris was destroyed and then rebuilt completely. For some reason, he skipped most of the Marais. So he sort of went around this neighborhood. So it's hemmed in by all these main boulevards, but then the neighborhood itself, it feels like a bit of a village right in the middle of Paris. So it's like very pedestrian friendly, it's like older buildings, and it has that kind of village feel to it. And so even the way that it is laid out, there's a big emphasis on food and drink. And that is because every arrondissement has to have what the French call essential shops, and they have to be walking distance from one another. So we don't really do our grocery shopping by car and going to like wholesale and stock up for the month, but the idea is that you get what you need every day or every 2 days. And so these essential shops, they have to be available to everyone, and they have to be at a distance, like relatively close to each other, to cover on foot. So the essentials would be a bakery, a cheese shop, a fruit and vegetable stand. Then you can choose between a butcher or a fishmonger, and a wine shop. Very important, of course, as well. So it's even that the zoning of the buildings is predetermined. So let's say that the butcher retires, then it will be proposed, that space will be proposed to another butcher before anyone else can take it as well. So that's a way that you avoid absolutely everything turning into a Starbucks as well, right? So it keeps that neighborhood like with food available to everyone. So our first stop here is one of those essentials, and it is the bakery. Now, what I want to do with you today is not just like bring you to a place and go like, hey, I really like this, have some, and then move to the next place, but also to give you some like ideas, things that you can look for, words, phrases, to do your own shopping as well, so that you know what it is that your options are, what it is that you are buying, because you'll see that sometimes one little word can make a really big difference in what you end up eating, right? And so bread and the bakery in general is a really good example of that, because the first thing, this is going to sound really obvious, but I'm still going to mention it, when you're looking for bread, make sure that you are at an actual bakery rather than just a place that sells bread, because those are two very different things. So the magic word is boulangerie, which is very easy to spot on this one here. So that means that you are at a proper bakery, and this one is called Tout autour du pain, which you see on the left and the right there. So that means all about, or literally all around bread is the name here. And as soon as I put the word boulangerie on the outside of my shop, it implies really what I'm doing and how I'm doing my work. So at a boulangerie, the bread that I'm selling has to be made on the premises. That is the most important thing. Rather than a place that sells bread, which can have industrial kitchens somewhere way out of town, sometimes even in a different country, and have it frozen and delivered to different places. Here, everything you see is made on the premises, right? And then of course, once I go into my boulangerie, there are a lot of different things that I can find. We're going to focus on two things, two essentials, the baguette and the croissant, right? And so out of the two, the baguette is the one that is eaten really throughout the day. The French, they eat bread with every meal. The baguette is still the staple food here. And when I walk into my bakery, technically I'll be able to find two different baguettes. There is the baguette ordinaire and the baguette de tradition. So the ordinary baguette and the traditional baguette. And they're gonna look really, really similar, but they are completely different foods. So my ordinary baguette is the industrial version of a baguette.
Yeah, it's
so it's
round.
got that kind of very thin crust, It's got that pale sort of bleach flour. Like if you break it open, it's really, really pale on the inside. It has like those really small air pockets. It's kind of like crunchy in texture, and it's very light, like literally in your hand, very light. Now these are allowed to have the bleached flour in it. They can put additives or preservatives in them to give them a longer shelf life. They are also allowed to be prepared somewhere else and then frozen and delivered to other places. Now, even though they are definitely edible, what you are looking for is a baguette de tradition, a traditional baguette. Because as soon as I put that on my label, it means I have to follow some rules. So a baguette de tradition can only have 4 ingredients. So it's only flour, water, salt, and yeast. Nothing else is allowed in there. Even if it's really good, even if it would be an egg or sugar, I cannot put that in there. So leave alone additives, preservatives, not allowed at all. So only 4 ingredients. And also it has to be made on the premises. So it's never allowed to be frozen. It has to be baked throughout the day where I sell it as well. Also, the rising time of the dough between the two is very different. So for the industrial baguette, the rising time of like 3 to 6 hours is considered enough. Whereas with a baguette de tradition, it starts at 9 hours and it can go for 12, or in this case of this bakery, 15 hours of rising time of the dough. So they leave the dough overnight before they bake it the next day, and it creates a very different texture. It's that kind of like more bouncy texture. If you break it open, it has like a thicker crust on it. It has those big air pockets on the inside, that sort of chewy texture, and it smells really earthy, like more like a sourdough. Right, so that's how you can tell the difference, but they're supposed to give you the hint on the label as well by putting the word tradition, so tradition spelled the same as in English, on there. The price difference between the two is minimal. It's only like 10 or 20 cents per baguette. So if you have the option, and now you know that you do, you might as well of course get the real deal. Yes, absolutely. So of course, because there's no preservatives allowed in it at all, it means that the shelf life of a baguette de tradition is only about 4 to 5 hours. So you can't really like cheat the system and get real bread in the morning and then go, all right, that way it's ready when I get home from work, because it will be completely stale. Like it's a weapon at that point. You make croutons basically, but that's about it. So you get a new one. So that's why around 6 p.m. is when the last batch of baguette de tradition comes out of the oven, and then that's why you see a lot of people outside of their bakeries at between 6 and 7 when they're on their way home from work. So your baker, the bakery in your neighborhood, is a place where you will be spending a lot of time if you live in Paris. It's important to have a good bakery in your neighborhood, because it's a person that you'll be seeing a lot really in your daily lives. Now the other thing that I wanted to tell you about, of course, is croissants. And croissants are more a food that is eaten at a particular time during the day. So whereas bread is all the time, technically a croissant is more a breakfast food. So it's part of a larger group of pastries that we call viennoiserie, which means pastries from Vienna, which is a bit weird because Vienna is not in France, of course, but a croissant is considered the Frenchest thing of them all. So the original croissants, if you will, from Vienna, were more dense, like a bread products. And then the French went, okay, cool, I see your bread, and I raise you. How do you Frenchify any recipe? Would you add?
Butter.
Butter, yeah, exactly. So you add a stick of butter into whatever it is you make. It could be a salad, doesn't matter. If you throw a stick of butter in there, it's a French salad. So that's how nowadays the base for croissants is what we call laminated dough, which is you have your dough nicely rolled out. You have a layer of like chilled butter that goes on top of that, and then the whole thing is folded. A little bit of yeast is added as well, and then a bit of butter will evaporate during the baking so that you get those beautiful fluffy buttery layers that you are looking for. And so a lot of bakeries, they will make like 1 or 2 batches in the morning, and then that's kind of it for the day if they sell out, unless you are very famous for your croissants. And that is the case at this bakery, because you see next to the door on the left two lists over there. And so the baker here, his name is Benjamin Turquier. He is now very, very, very well known. He was not originally a baker like from a young age. He switched careers as an adult. He used to work in finance. He used to be a banker, and then he wanted to become a baker. He's self-taught as well, so he didn't go to culinary school, but it was a very, very good career change because those two lists here are all the awards that he's won for his baguette de tradition and his butter croissants. Right? And so every year there are competitions for all these different kinds of food. So best something something in Paris. There's one for everything, but the most important ones are considered the baguette and the croissant competition. And every year that Benjamin Turquet has participated, he's finished in the top 10. So he's never been outside of the top 10 with both, which is really unusual because people tend to specialize in one or the other. So they do like either bread or viennoiserie croissants, but he really excels in both. So the competition is every year in May. And so this year he placed 4th on best baguette and 8th place for best croissant. Now to put this into perspective for you, within the 20 arrondissements of Paris, there's 3,000 bakeries. So if you're in the top 10 consistently, that is a pretty big deal.
3,000?
And yes, and so he's managed to do that. And so I have baguette de tradition, of course, from here, ready for us with Arthur Saint-Jean for the wine tasting, and then of course I got you some croissants as well to have right away. So there's a croissant for Lily in there as well, if we can keep it for her.
Oh,
Absolutely. All right. And so he's really the guy who's known for having this like really long rising time on the dough. So it's 15 hours. And apparently he stayed with his bread, with his dough all night, the night before the competition. And he like brought it over by himself on his bicycle. You're supposed to give like 3 baguettes basically for the participation. And so the way it works, this competition is really, it's a huge deal. This is like front page news. And we're doing riots and we're doing bread. That's like the most important news here. And so what they look at is an entire list of things. So they go from like, okay, how is the crust? How is the texture? How is the smell? How is the like? If you break it open, how does it look? You know, all of that, and then the actual tasting as well. So I always thought like, well, it would be quite fun to be a judge on these kinds of things. So I'm good at eating bread. I should do this sometime. And then I realized that you can, because the judges, it's a mix of people from the industry, so other bakers, previous winners, and then civilians. So you can sign up, you can be a judge for this as well if you sign up. And one of our guides, Jennifer, she's done it, and I asked her about it, and she was like, oh yeah, no, it's not relaxed or anything at all. You have to taste 100 baguettes.
Oh my gosh. How many judges are there?
In total, that's a good question. I don't know if she's mentioned that. But they all have to do, you have to do the full 100. And then what I know is that they give them to you like sort of 5 at a time, and they have a little band around it with a number. And so you have to do the entire checklist, and it's on a timer, so you have to be quite quick as well. And then you're only allowed to drink water, so no coffee, juice, soda, nothing to influence your palate. And then the civilian judges are supposed to, you have to make your top 5, and then that gets passed on to the professional judges. They do the same, and then in the end they make a top 10 every year. So it's a huge deal, and to consistently place in that is pretty impressive. And so I thought if you win a lot of money, or like I thought there would be like $1 million. Like no. Awning here as well.
So
Everything that has been cooked, cured, dried, everything that's ready to eat, right? So it doesn't require any cooking anymore. It's even cold and it's ready as it is. So anything from like ham to pate to dried sausages, even things like foie gras technically also fall under charcuterie. And so this one is it's named after the first owner of the history of the world itself. Since 1930, it's been the same family. So when you were talking about things like pate and terrine, you're talking about things that are cooked in a dish. So So both the dish and what is in it are both called a terrine. And then what is in it can be with or without a lid on it. And you can also use other things as a lid because there's that. Non, je pars la semaine prochaine.
And this is the real duck foie gras, and it's 230 euros a kilo. Not like the other stuff that was up front. Just wanted to point that out.
Like jewelry.
It's amazing.
Ok. En fait, je veux juste prendre les petits bouts comme ça et après, ça va pas trouver. Je reprends les pierres.
That's a tired mom.
It's hot out. There's a small kitchen in there. So this is the baguette de tradition from there. So instead of having like a bread basket and then cutting it really small and then passing that around all the time, I just asked them to cut entire baguettes in half. So that way you have your piece of bread for the entire tasting. So that way you can have your bread, you know, your cheese with your bread, without your bread, on your bread, in your bread. You can do whatever you want. And there is an extra baguette in there as well. So if you finish it for some reason half a baguette is not enough, then there is an extra piece as well. So I'm going to give you this bag. You can pick out a piece for yourself and then pass the rest of it around. So what I'm going to do, we have bread, we have cheese, we have charcuterie.
Just pull one out for me.
And so I will cut the cheeses for you. I'm going to pass it.
Oh, we got
depending
the
on
same
which
one.
cheese it is.
Look at that.
Sometimes it fits on this one, sometimes on this one. It's quite light. So this one I can pass around to you quite easily. And then you can use your own little fork to like help yourself to a piece, and then I will just tell you a little bit about it while you're eating, so you don't have to wait until I'm done or anything. You can start right away. And then of course I have my beautiful map of France here as well, so I can show you a little bit about where everything is from. I know that from your end of the table it might be more difficult to see everything, so I'll do like big gestures. It's really just about the different regions, and then if you want to, of course, you can also, you know, come and have a closer look at the map if you want to. But usually I can show you where everything is. And start with that. Like they're either like sitting on a leaf, or sometimes they're like wrapped all the way in it as well. And that's because the leaf gives moisture to the cheese while it is aging. So instead of getting that kind of more crumbly texture, it stays quite smooth, and it gets, this one is like nice, like young still, because it's kind of that chalky texture. And then if it would age more, the bit of cheese between the rind and the very center goes really runny and more gooey. So that way if I would cut it, it would also like explode a little bit. So then you know it's really, really ripe. This one is still very much on the more chalky side, so it's like creamy, chalky, really fresh, really young. So it goes really well with white wines as well, with sparkling wines, and it's a great cheese to start with. So this one has that ashed rind on it, so cendré, rubbed with ash. And that gives it a little bit of an extra dimension in the flavor. If you have a cheese with or without the ash, the one with the ash will be slightly stronger. But because this was aged on the leaf, it actually goes more towards the milder again, because the leaf also regulates the pH levels in the cheese. So you get this sort of perfect balance between that like typical flavor for goat cheese, so a little bit of that barnyard sensation and smell also, but then with a lot of freshness and that bit of chalky texture to it. So this one will be aged around 2 weeks. 4 weeks for a goat's milk cheese is already old. Like with others, we don't even, like the aged cow's milk cheeses, we don't even really start talking about them until like months in. These go very, very quickly. So it's like days to weeks is the aging process on all of these. I'm gonna give this to you right away. When you pass it to the next person, please just be careful of that you don't swipe too much, because we've had some accidents with glasses and I don't want Jean to have to buy new glasses every couple of days. So just be careful. So you can take this and pass it around. Yes. So this is actually a very good part, because this little sign here is the appellation sign. So when it has that regulation on it, you'll see this sign on the label of the cheese, on the packaging, or they'll write it out for you. So it means it's one of those 46 that has to follow lots of rules. It's from here, it's from the Jura. It's cow's milk cheese, unpasteurized, and so anywhere between 3 months and 2.5 years. In terms of age, you'll be able to find. And so the rind on this, it's just layers of salt water. Like nothing will happen to you if you eat it. But when it was still the entire...
Oh, hi everybody. Sitting out here on this little balcony in this courtyard with no view. I'll show you around here. Anyway, I'm sitting out here smoking a cigar and talking to you guys. We have pretty much finished for the day. We've been at it for 12 hours, almost 5 miles of walking. We started out this morning at 6:30, got up, and we trying to figure out where I need to look so I'm centered in this thing. It's very weird. Anyway, and so we got up at 6:30, we went to Versailles, we walked all through Versailles, then we took a taxi back and we went to the location where we were going to meet for the food tour, but we were early, so we walked to a Jewish museum, toured the museum, which was very good, and after the museum, walked back over to the food tour. It was still early, so we found a little shaded little park area with a bench, and we were sitting there. It's been extremely hot, 91 degrees here today, and you know, it's just unfortunate that it's that hot, but it is what it is. Food tour was excellent, really, really excellent. Girl was great. Went around, collected a bunch of stuff, and then we went to a wine bar. Had the wine and all the things that were collected. You guys will see all of that, or have probably already seen it in the video, because this will be the end of the video, this little talk. And this is pretty much going to be it for today, unless something exciting happens later, then I'll add it on. But right now, I'm gonna piece together everything and upload it, and this will be the conclusion of day 2 in Paris. So hope everybody is doing well, and hasta la bye-bye.